I got Words of Heart coming up next. Dion, welcome to the show, or welcome to the
Hi.
day. I don't know what I'm starting to
Yeah,
get tired.
yeah. Hi, Jeff. Thank you for letting me appear. I was concerned because I'm in Florida, which is where I'm located, and we just sort of embraced the storm of Hurricane Ian. Not too much damage from where I am, but I the power knocked out my house, so luckily I was able to do this from my sister's home.
Oh, that is great. We had the meet and greet the other night where we can meet all the speakers, and I mentioned that some of our speakers were in Florida, and one I was particularly concerned about. You said you lost power, you don't know what's going to happen, and I'm
Well,
so glad to hear from you.
yeah, it's supposed to come back on tomorrow afternoon, but by then this event will be over, which I'm glad I can help celebrate this day. I've been podcasting for 2 years now, so I'm very glad I can do this.
This is so great. I'm so glad you made it, and everything's going to work out. I'm going to get out of your way and let you run your show.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Dion Sanchez, host of the Words of Heart podcast. I have been running the podcast for about 2 years now. In addition to that, from that time span, I was featured in the 2022 issue of Women Who Podcast magazine. It is a remarkable magazine that highlights female podcasters, and I was given the opportunity to be featured in one of their issues. International Podcast Day is a wonderful day. I feel as podcasters, we should be highlighted, we should be celebrated. And I'm so honored that Jeff has given me the opportunity to appear on this platform. I guess I'll start with sharing with why I started podcasting from my personal experience and how it sort of evolved from there. So I started my podcast 2 years ago, August 23rd, 2020, a year that nobody wants to recall ever existing for numerous reasons. So, leading up to August 23rd, 2020, around 2019, November 2019 to be specific, I was suffering symptoms of diabetes. I was basically becoming a skeleton and could have turned into dust at any given moment, to be quite blunt. So that was a really depressing and heartbreaking experience for me. 2019, and then 2020 is when I got diagnosed with diabetes. So I saw that diagnosis as a blessing in disguise because I'm a Christian. I do share and highlight my faith on a couple episodes here and there on my show because it's a fundamental component as to why it started. So, as a result of my diagnosis, I felt called to be a warrior for change. Um, I sort of have led on to that mantra and has transpired onto my show to be more vocal, to use the power of my voice for good. So, how exactly does one do that? First and foremost, I have no experience with being vocal prior to podcasting. Several months before November 2019, I started doing spoken word videos. So that also ties into the title and to my show as well, Words of Heart. I have a way with words because I'm a poet. And when it comes to heart, I speak from the heart. I give advice truly and solely from my heart, first and foremost. So that's how the title came to be, Words of Heart. Kind of catchy. So um, around June 2020, I started realizing what God meant as far as me using my voice for good. I started utilizing Zoom sessions, which was very utilized during the pandemic through my church. So I started using Zoom sessions, and they also started a podcast also. So they were like, Dion, what you say matters and it's inspiring. And like, I found it hard to believe, how can I be inspiring through a computer screen? Like, the screen is only this big. Like, how can you be inspiring? So I took to heart to what they said and what God was calling me to do. And basically, that summer, June 2020, to be specific, I said, use me however you want to use me, God. And not too long after that, in August, I started my podcast, Words of Heart. Keeping in mind, I am a 26-year-old college student, going to be 27 in November of this year. So I had no experience with radio or audio. I mean, I did journalism in high school and I'm a poet, but as far as how to do a podcast, I had no idea. So I literally started my podcast on this cell phone here, using the platform Anchor. I know there's several other platforms of which to use. There's Buzzsprout, Podbean, Good Pods is another platform, I'm sure. So as far as platforms to use, I do recommend Anchor for starting out. It's free to use, and their distribution as far as getting a podcast out there is pretty easy. They distribute it to Apple, Spotify, and several other podcasting platforms that I can't even count. There's like several others like Podchaser and a million others, of which is a lot. And so as far as starting out, I recommend Anchor. For myself starting out, I just did audio because that's the only luxury of which I had using my cell phone. I had no idea what I was doing, as many first podcasters are. I thought it had to be scripted. You had to do this, this, and this on a set schedule, but that's not the case. 2 years later now, I realize when it comes to podcasting, you should just stick with what you're comfortable with. You should stick with your niche. If your niche is video games, do video games. If it's boxing, it's boxing. Whatever it is you feel you're comfortable in or you feel like you're passionate about, I say stick with that. And everything else will come naturally. So again, I started off doing audio for my first season. I believe my first season is about 15 episodes. As far as an episode range, like should I do 10 episodes? Should I do 15 episodes? It really just depends on what you're comfortable with in that respect as well. Because some people do 50, some people do 20. I don't think there's a ballpark figure as far as how many episodes to do. However, I will say this. As far as the time length of podcast, I wouldn't go over an hour, depending on the topic. Some topics I feel like you can leverage out and stretch it out depending on the topic of which you want to talk about. But going over an hour is a bit much. The attention span of a human, I want to say, is 5 seconds. 5 seconds. So you have to be able to capture their attention in that 5-second span. It's going to be hard to keep it going literally past even 10 minutes, to be honest. So as far as the time length, I wouldn't go past an hour if you can help it. For my podcast, I try not to go over an hour. I stick with about 30 minutes to 45 minutes. However, if you feel that your guest, if you do have guests on your show, is talking about something riveting and compelling and they got a good groove going, I wouldn't stop them. But that's just my point of view. I don't really have a time limit for which my guests talk, but I try to keep an idea of when I want it to end. So yes. What else? So as I mentioned, I did audio solely for the first season. The second season is when I started switching things up because I had the capacity to. I had access to a new laptop, so I was able to incorporate video podcast as well, which was a little tricky at first as well because I didn't have access to good Wi-Fi at the time. So as a result, it was kind of hard to do a good podcast on video. But luckily, I got a new laptop. So as a result, I was able to branch out and have a new range of audience members as far as video. Because some people want to see a person to the screen. They don't want to hear like jibber jabber and knock knock jokes. They want to see the person behind the story. And what started out for me personally, just sharing my story, sharing my vulnerability has expanded so much more to not just my story, but to other people's stories as well. And that's the wonderful thing about this podcast community as a whole. We all, I believe, sort of have the same kind of vision in a way, is to entertain, help, and just be a positive force for other human beings in this universe. For myself, I'm sure other podcasts started in 2020 as well. People were isolated, they were confused, they were terrified. And what can you do in a 4-to-4 wall without going outside? So just the fact that podcasting platform as a whole just has a way of helping people, entertaining people. And for my platform specifically, since it focuses on mental health, it has the capacity to save people's lives as well. So video podcasting, audio podcasting, all offer its own variety of helping people in a way. Anchor shows you the analytics for different types of countries like Ireland and Spain and all these countries that, to my knowledge, don't really speak English as their first dialect. So it's fascinating how much your podcast can reach other people. It's incredible. So as I mentioned, I started introducing guests in the second season, and I've continued doing so moving forward. As far as advice to change up your podcast, I do recommend video podcasting. I feel YouTube and Instagram offers a new audience and new listeners. I, for one, this current season have utilized audio spaces such as Clubhouse, Instagram Lives, and Twitter Spaces. Twitter Spaces offers you the opportunity to have random people come into your space and tune in. So Twitter Spaces not only offers you a new way of doing your podcast, but offers collaborations with fellow podcasters as well. So as far as changing things up, I believe in videotaping your podcast. But again, it all depends on your comfortability. Because for me, I like to make sure my guests are comfortable. So one of the first things I offer, like, hey, do you want to do audio or do you want to do video? Because, I mean, these people are, for the first time, because I don't do in-person meetings at first off. When I'm meeting them for the first time is when you're meeting them for the first time. Because I believe in a genuine, authentic reaction. So I do get several responses, like 100 plus a day. But when it comes to the first interview, I meet them, you meet them. So everything they're saying, I basically am hearing for the first time as well. So it keeps up with that authentic, genuine reaction and authenticity of what my podcast represents. So I believe in collaborations with fellow podcasters. From the collaborations I've done a collaboration with a podcast called 90s and 2000s Movie Podcast with the hosts Danielle and Jackie. They used to work at Blockbuster. I hope I don't get that history wrong. They used to work at Blockbuster, so they review 90s and 2000 movies. And I love movies. So as an episode, which I'm sure I want to say is season 3 of the show, I've done a lot of episodes at this point. We talked about our top 5 favorite movies. And it wasn't necessarily about mental health or anything with trauma or anything of that nature. So it's okay to go outside what you normally talk about as your choice topic. Movies, video games. There was another podcaster called Abigail, who's the host of the Manic Pixie Weirdo podcast. She's appeared on my show several times, and I've appeared on hers as well. We talked about poetry. We talked about, for my show specifically, we talked about me navigating being single. So having other people appear on your show, collaborations, guest host, I'm all for that because it offers not only a different variety of what your normal listeners expect, but it's be like, wow, I need to share this with other people type of reaction because it's different. And it doesn't, and from my own personal experience, we're not meant to be normal. We're meant to be different and think outside of the box. So collaborations, talking with other podcasters, appearing on other shows as well. I'm like chuckling because it's funny, because before podcasting, I didn't vocalize anything. I didn't talk about anything. So when it comes to podcasting as a whole, any advice I can give as far as should I start a podcast, should I not start a podcast, I say do it. And if you want to go an extra notch and get certain equipment, I recommend getting a microphone first if you already have access to a computer. The Blue Yeti microphone, which is the microphone, which is honestly is the first upgrade as far as podcasting equipment I made for my show. I want to say it was about $120, maybe more. It depends on, I guess, the color of the microphone of which you get. So as far as upgrading, changing it up, I recommend collaborations, also appearing on other podcasts. I appeared on maybe, it's hard to keep track now. I want to say about 5, maybe more now. And basically what I've done when I appear on other podcasts is talk about my show, but also my own personal story. And as far as my own personal story, it's also symbiotic to my podcast as a whole. Because when it comes to podcasting, you're using your voice. You're being that inspiration, that influence for the people of which you are reaching. So for me, it's a bit more personal as for me, because, and I'm going to backtrack to the history of Dion now. For the first 2 years of my life, I couldn't hear her talk. So when it comes to vocalization and lack thereof, not being able to use your voice, having your voice be silent, I understand that more so than anybody else because it internally happened to me. Obviously, I'm speaking before you, so that didn't stick. So speaking, using your voice, podcasting as a whole, particularly on this day, is so fundamentally important because audio, video, all of it can reach the depths of one's mind, depths of one's soul, if you want to be more personal. And it's just such a wonderful platform. I'm laughing now because I'm so honored to be able to talk about podcasting. I have put so much passion into this show for the past 2 years now. for love all content. Oh, thank you, Brandy. I've put so much content into this podcast for the past 4, not 4. I'm mixing up. I've put so much content into this podcast for 2 years and now 4 seasons. I'm currently in my 4th season. I find this humorous anecdote to mention because as a result of the pandemic, I had a lot of availability. First, obviously, I mentioned I was diabetic in January 2020. So I took a break from school, but before everything got shut down. Of course, fast forward to August is when I started the podcast. So everything got turned virtually, remotely, through Zoom, through StreamYard. So I had a lot of availability. And this is the reason of which I'm mentioning this. Apparently, as I mentioned, depending on your comfortability, you can go from 5 episodes to 15 episodes to 30 episodes. It really doesn't, there's no concrete rule as far as how many episodes you can do. I do recommend doing it for 20 or 30 minutes and not going past an hour, but that is just myself personally. So in the 2nd season, as a result of having to do school online, not having a job also, I ended up doing, it's funny now, I ended up doing about 103 episodes in the 2nd season. Apparently 103 episodes for a beginner is unheard of. So when it comes to episodes and how much you do, I say do as much as you want. I had the luxury of not having a car, not really having any responsibilities of which that would force me to go outside the house. Of course, that's different this season because I have a job and an internship, which I've worked very hard for. So, yes, I suggest doing as much episodes as you want, what you're comfortable with. I do highly recommend reaching out to fellow podcasters. It's a wonderful community. So I'll just wrap things up real quickly. So again, it's a wonderful community. Twitter, I recommend as far as reaching out to fellow podcasters. I find that to be very fundamental and a big booster for my show as well. They retweet, they subscribe to everything I post. As far as other social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, if you're going to use Instagram and your podcast is video, I recommend uploading mini previews, whether it's video or Headliner, which is the audio-based app. I recommend using that because it gives your audience a taste of what to expect, a taste of what is to come. And they're going to be like, whoa, I need to check this out right now. Click. So I recommend posting previews of your podcast if you can. There's also TikTok, but for me personally, I think TikTok is based on sort of humor or social. I don't really... TikTok works depending on, I think, the podcast. For me, I can't really get with TikTok. I tried, but I couldn't figure it out. Maybe I'll get back into it because podcasting, TikTok, Facebook, all of those social platforms does appeal to a younger audience or older audience. My podcast, for one, reaches all age ranges. I try to focus on young adult, but in the grand scheme of things, it can apply to anyone. So again, my podcast is called Words Apart. I've been doing it for 2 years now. It's a wonderful platform. It's about in-depth conversations of inspiration. We cover a wide range of topics, whether it's rape or abuse or narcissistic spouses. That was one episode of which I covered that. Porn addiction. That was a remarkable one. It featured a TEDx speaker called Joshua Shea. I've done a lot of interviews, and that one is by far the most memorable because it's a topic I wasn't sure of how to go about covering it. Because there's probably many ways you can go about covering a topic, but porn addiction, like, how does one cover that? So I'm very honored that I was able to touch that and share that on my platform. Because when it comes to my podcast, I like it to be an open form of acceptance and comfort. Like, the world may silence you, but I'm not going to silence you. I like to be that support system for which I kind of had a lack thereof growing up. I mean, my childhood wasn't terrible, but it wasn't complete either. As a result of my deficiencies, as I mentioned earlier, it was a struggle, my mental health. And I just want to be that olive branch of which to extend to people that I wish someone would have done for me, quite honestly. So again, thank you, Chef, for giving me this opportunity to appear, talk about podcasting. It's a wonderful platform, and I'm very honored to be a part of this International Podcast Day.
Very good. You said you're on season 4 is coming out with your show. Is that correct?
Yeah, season 4 is already out now. Oh. I've released, I want to say, about 15 episodes now.
Okay.
It's not as much as past seasons because now I have a job and an internship, which I'm trying to put more focus on that. I did forget to mention, though, of which I do major in graphic design, which is why my podcast art is so awesome and dope, because I kind of had a hand in creating that. Actually, let me clarify. The photo, which was taken at a mall in a store called Selfie World here in Tampa, it was in Tampa, and my father changed the color palette to red, and the neon sign was called Feelings, and I used my graphic design expertise, of which I'm studying, to change the title to Words Apart. Okay. So
yes, very well. We're very well done. If you haven't gone to the registration page, you can see all the logos from all the podcasts. Yours is very well done, very professional. And kind of what I wanted to ask you, we have a couple more minutes, was how far you've come in the 4 seasons. Where do you see podcasts taking you maybe 4 seasons from now?
4 seasons from now? That is a good question.
Can you imagine 8 seasons?
I can't even imagine what I'm going to have for dinner tonight. 4 seasons from now. I think I would like to be recognized locally where I'm from, St. Petersburg, Florida. I think that would be really cool to be recognized in my hometown and to be highlighted as someone who's making an impact in the mental health community. So that's one. I would like to, I already mentioned Women Who Podcast Magazine, which is a wonderful podcast. If you're a female podcaster listening to this, I highly recommend looking them up. They're on Instagram, and I can refer them if you want to reach out to me personally as well. They highlight female podcasters. They're always looking for people. It's just a wonderful magazine and representation of female podcasters, and I'm very glad to be given the opportunity to be featured in that particular issue.
Do you see maybe more public speaking and or more events, more
yes
like this? Yes.
yes. Jeff, while I have you, this is the first podcasting event that I honestly had the privilege of attending. And I'm really, because as much as I love podcasting, live, other stuff, they kind of take precedence. And last year, this time, I posted a silly graphic poster, oh, happy podcast day, but I had to work. So even though my circumstances were a bit tricky due to the hurricane, I see it as a blessing and relief because I wouldn't have been given the opportunity to do this opportunity right now if it wasn't for my circumstances, and just I'm very grateful. So yes, more publication, more events like this. Just have Words of Hearts and neon lights somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, you went from no electricity this morning to finding a place to run your episode. So
yes.
you got it done. Well, congratulations. Great episode. 4 seasons already out. The Words of Heart podcast. The best way to connect and find you online or through the podcast apps?
Well, the podcasting, I mean, I think if you listen to a podcast, it's really easy to access where my podcast is. But as far as direct contact with the podcast itself, I'm on Facebook, Words of Heart Podcasts. I believe the URL is called Heart Warrior 24 to be more specific. I'm also on Twitter, Heart Warrior 24, and on Instagram at Heart Warrior 25. My regular podcast website URL, I don't know how to pronounce. I know it's called Words of Heart, but I think it's called Podpage as well because I utilize that site. Oh, if you're going to create a website for your podcast, I recommend Podpage. It integrates everything, video, other user platforms as far as podcasts. It is a great starter website as well. I also recommend Facebook as well. 2 websites I think is a good way to branch out as well. If you want to. That might be too much work for you. I don't know. But yes.
How about this? We'll show a little bit of your artwork. And it is podpages.com/words-of-heart. Let's put that into the comments here. So if you want to check it out, you can see the artwork and everything that's going on. Podpage.com, Words of Heart. And you're up for that's the big screen.
I didn't expect you to pull up my website. That's pretty cool.
Surprise. All that happens in real time. Sometimes it looks like I'm not doing anything, but I'm like frantically copying and pasting stuff. But Dion, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that you made it. I'm so grateful that I heard from you after you said, I don't know what's going to happen. So everything's great.
I am so sorry. I felt so bad when I sent that message. Like, oh, I don't think I can come.
Well, I figured you probably were texting people and then shutting your phone off to conserve electricity. But I was like, I just hope I hear from her.
Well, I have a portable battery charger. So I was able to use my phone as much as probably more than humanly possible. But I still wanted to let you know and be professional because if anything, I want to be professional when it comes to podcasting. I think I'm pretty flexible when guests cancel on me, although my understanding has changed slightly because I've put so much heart into this. When people fail to be professional with me, I don't follow up with them. So I keep sharing advice and tips. I can't stop with that, but
it's a passion. It's a passion for all of us. And that's kind of what makes this day special. It's 24 podcasters coming together, sharing what they love in different formats, concepts, constructs. Yeah. I'm going to run a nonsense trivia show in 2 hours. So we all have these different things, but we all love the idea that we can create and control, our destiny and our future. So
Yes.